He doesn't shout. He doesn't haggle. When Francis Ford Coppola loses faith in an actor, there's no theater, no forewarning, only silence and remoteness. For more than half a century, Coppola's films have set the standard for ambition. He constructs chaos. He demands myths. And when it succeeds, it's classic. But when it fails, he cuts deep, silently, irrevocably. One missed beat, one collision of vision, that's enough. He doesn't blow up. He obliterates. Coppola does not merely tell stories. He declares war through film, by instinct, with a code of loyalty, and with actors who meet him halfway. And when one betrays that trust, he doesn't rebuild. He rewrites. He's collaborated with Brando, Pacino, De Niro, Diane Keaton, legends. But not all of them made it out the other side. Here are 5 actors Coppola locked out of his movie universe, and why they never returned. Al Pacino was the first. The footage worried everyone. The studio panicked. Coppola second-guessed himself. Executives were ready to replace Pacino with James Caan, the man already cast as Sonny. Coppola later admitted, "I thought I'd made a terrible mistake," after watching the dailies, and gave Pacino the kind of blunt honesty that defined his directing. "You're not cutting it." That tension never fully disappeared. Pacino was always guarded with Coppola, polite but aloof. They did not work together again until The Godfather Part 2. Coppola required total immersion. Pacino required definition. Sometimes those two things weren't compatible. Coppola later called Pacino's transformation miraculous, but he also stated years later, "Al kept his distance from me. I knew why." There was no scandalous falling out, no sensational departure. Only 2 artists who flared too brightly too soon and never returned to the starting point. They made history. Coppola created a masterpiece. But ultimately, they created it apart. Harvey Keitel arrived next. He was hired as lead in Apocalypse Now, and then he disappeared without scandal, without explanation. The choice surprised people. Keitel wasn't a stranger. He had already performed for Scorsese, with that primal volcanic intensity that directors adored. But Coppola wanted Apocalypse, now to have a still point in a disintegrating world. Keitel wasn't still, not quite. The production had hardly started when Coppola could feel it. There was something about Keitel's energy that didn't work with the psychological beat of the movie. He moved too much, thought too loudly, carried too much weight in every step. Coppola told him he was a great actor, but he couldn't play Willard. He just didn't have the passivity. 2 weeks after filming began in the Philippines, Keitel was gone. Martin Sheen flew in to replace him. The film went on, and Keitel's name disappeared from the credits like he was never there. But that tension remained. Keitel never publicly commented on getting fired. Coppola didn't say much either, but inside people referred to it as a conflict of instincts. Keitel had brought flames. Coppola needed mist. It wasn't a matter of talent, it was a matter of trust. And once Coppola loses it, there is no renegotiation. The aftermath wasn't loud. No public spat, no caustic words, just silence. Keitel moved on to other legendary roles, Bad Lieutenant, Reservoir Dogs, The Piano, but he never worked with Coppola again. The thing about Coppola is that he doesn't do revolving doors. Once you're out, you're out. And Keitel was the first major star to be cut loose mid-production. He became the warning for every actor who came after. With Coppola, sometimes it's not personal, but it's always permanent. And then there was Shia LaBeouf, who didn't even reach the set. He was committed to Francis Ford Coppola's long-gestating dream picture, Megalopolis, a movie some almost 40 years in the making. The cast was big time. The budget was big time. And so was LaBeouf, too big time. From the very start, things did not mesh. Coppola is a gut kind of guy. He creates worlds on instinct, not on Excel spreadsheets. LaBeouf is method, detail-oriented, control-oriented. That tension ignited quickly. In an interview, Shia confessed, "I became a pain. I kept asking him things, and he just wasn't clarifying anything." Coppola's method was something LaBeouf had never seen before, cryptic, poetic, symbolic. He'd give directions like, "Feel the architecture," or "Let the character melt," and then simply walk away. LaBeouf, who was accustomed to structure and logic, was perplexed. He later said, "You have to mine his mind to figure out what the F we're even talking about." Tension built in rehearsals. LaBeouf started pulling away. Coppola, already managing a famously chaotic production, didn't chase him. He just let him go. There was no official announcement, no press release. She has simply disappeared from a cast. It wasn't the first time that a Coppola picture devoured someone in short order, but it hurt this time because LaBeouf really wanted to please him. He had gushed over Coppola in public, called it an honor to work with him. But dreams only survive when timing is right, and for both of them, everything was off kilter. Coppola never commented on LaBeouf's final exit, but he didn't have to. In his universe, silence is a verdict. Shia's name is an afterthought in the production. No credits, no cameo, just an omission in the casting records that shouts louder than any of us could. You don't talk your way into a Coppola film. You become one. And when you don't, you disappear. And then there's Marlon Brando. A work of genius on paper. But by the time shooting on Apocalypse Now started, Francis Ford Coppola didn't want to direct him. He needed to survive him. Brando was to play Colonel Kurtz, the legendary broken shadow of the center of Vietnam. It was to be genius on arrival. Instead, it was mayhem. He arrived heavy, out of shape, and most astoundingly, utterly unprepared. He had not read Heart of Darkness, the seminal text on which the film was based. He didn't get Kurtz, didn't like the script, and didn't want to film the scenes as written. Coppola was shocked. He had waited years to prepare for this performance. And now that the crew was already well into the Philippine jungle, it all was falling apart. Coppola later recalled, "Marlon hadn't even read the book. We had to stop everything for a week just to get him up to speed." The production came to a halt for a whole week. Brando isolated himself, rereading the novel and Coppola's rewritten script. The tension was palpable. Brando started challenging nearly everything. He didn't memorize dialogue. He rejected simple blocking. He demanded that his character's motivations were not the same and refused to be shot in bright light because he had gained weight. The figure of Kurtz, initially conceived as a shadowy menace, needed to be reimagined as a ghostly apparition. Coppola had to reshoot scenes wholesale. He put Brando in the dark, employed body doubles, spoke through cue cards, held out of sight. The legend persisted, but so did the volatility. Interviews years after, Coppola confessed, "I was terrified of Brando. He could destroy the entire movie with a whisper." The last scenes are haunting because they were filmed under conditions of utmost duress. The fear in the room was not acting, it was actual. Their union had exhausted its fuel and almost destroyed both men in the process. What they recorded on film was eternal. What they suffered off-screen, a slow blow-up, gave Coppola a nervous breakdown. And that's the kind of scar that doesn't fade. And then there's Gary Oldman. During filming on Bram Stoker's Dracula, Coppola believed he was making something operatic. What he ended up with was chaos. Oldman wasn't acting, he was disappearing. Deep method, full immersion. The kind of performance that devours everything, including the room. Coppola was at first impressed, then worried. Oldman's devotion seeped off the screen. He remained in character as Dracula, even offstage, creeping, whispering, never looking away. That was perhaps okay for the part, but it dissolved the chemistry with Winona Ryder. In one pivotal scene, Coppola allegedly pushed Oldman to emotionally challenge Ryder, to shock her. And he did. He went so far that she congealed up after the camera finished rolling. Ryder remembered later, they absolutely didn't get along. Coppola struggled to hold it together. He desired intensity, not destruction. But something had changed. Ryder started to distance himself. Oldman became ISO. The atmosphere on set became heavy with implicit tension. Coppola, ever the director of tone and rhythm, sensed the discord. In a candid admission, he once stated, they got along, and then one day they absolutely didn't. Production resumed, but the atmosphere never rebounded. Ryder kept Oldman off-screen. Scenes were reshot. The director's vision was becoming hazy. Coppola did not fire Oldman. He did not yell at him. He simply wrapped the film and destroyed the future. No reunions, no sequels, no invitations. Oldman proceeded to win Oscars and top blockbusters. Coppola retreated to quieter, more intimate films. Their careers diverged like oil and water, stirred once, never again mixed. It wasn't about hate. It was about misalignment. Coppola doesn't seek closure. He just closes the book. And Gary Oldman, despite all his genius, never received another chapter. In Coppola's universe, endings don't require a door slam. Other times, it's a silent departure, a nod, or the empty space created when a voice is removed from the next film's casting sheet.